This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is February 5th, 2026.
I'm Scott Loneboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, more and more and more names for the BC Conservative leadership are coming forward. Some old, some very old, and I guess a new one maybe. Meanwhile, Pierre Poilievre survived his leadership vote, and Mark Carney now has a AI consultation report in his hands that was written by AI. Support the show at patreon.com/politicos, and yeah, I'll try and get you in the Slack right away. And if you are a listener who does give us money on Patreon and you are not in the Slack because of whatever reason you missed the invite or I missed sending it, send me an email. You can email us at podcast@politicos.ca. Let's start here in British Columbia. The BC Conservative leadership race is heating up. It was not enough to have 7 leadership candidates so far, I think. But we got more. There's just more and more. Everyone was running.
That $6 entry fee did not dissuade many people, it seems like.
Everyone has an idea that they can run. Do you remember, what was it, 2015, 2016 for the federal Conservative leadership race?
Yeah,
there were 12?
I thought it was 14.
Maybe it was 14.
O'Leary dropped out right near the end, so depending on whether you count him or not. Yeah, it was around 14, plus or minus like 1 on that, which is ridiculous. And, I think as we all witnessed on that one, bid race does not necessarily mean the most talented politician can rise to the top, because weird things happen with so many rounds of runoffs. So, we may be in for an Andrew Scheer tier leader to emerge out of this unintentionally.
Not to compare him to Andrew Scheer, but first up we have Steve Cooner. This is a Conservative MLA who was elected in 2024 to Richmond Queensborough. He unseated Aman Singh by a couple thousand votes. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. He spent $30,000 on his campaign while the NDP spent $60,000. It was one of those rough nights for the NDP, because I know Singh was quite popular in the party, but Cooner has made a name for himself. He has appointed the shadow attorney general for the Conservatives, and prior to his time in office was a lawyer. His campaign is launching with the same messaging they're all messaging, which is we need to, I'm not going to say make BC great again. None of them have used that exactly. But his website is bringbackbc.ca. And he talks about kind of the greatest hits of the Conservative Party's rhetoric these days about overturning DRIPA and protecting property rights and stopping crime and freedom.
Indeed, there's nothing unique on this one in terms of policy positions he's putting out. Biographically, it's a little interesting because he did previously seek a federal Liberal nomination, I believe, in Surrey. So, on a campaign that is likely going to be shaped by fights about who is and is not a true conservative, there's going to be a tough road ahead for him on this one, I think.
Also, possibly a name recognition thing, as a relatively new MLA.
Yeah, first-term MLA, which it's the Conservatives' real first time in opposition at this level, so that's going to be the case for a lot of them. And like AEG credit is a not insignificant credit role, but I think as a lot of people in the legislature learn is that once you get outside Victoria or Ottawa, depending on which level we're talking about, the name recognition can drop off a lot, and that's potentially going to be a problem for both him and our next contestant.
Well, he is the second longest serving Conservative MLA in the current iteration. Bruce Banman, the MLA for Abbotsford South, is throwing his name in as well. He's got his website up where he calls himself the Conservative Without Apology, because, we have way too many apologetic Conservatives in this era. Banman's been a MLA a few times. Once again, same kind of policy issues on his website. Regulations there's too much red tape. We need to, protect personal freedom, unlock natural resources.
Put healthcare workers back to a few of these ones. You kind of have to squint at a bit because it's literally one sentence on the website, and to read between the line there, it sure seems like a lot of this stuff is still kind of hung up on COVID in 2026 and really fighting not even the last war, but the war before that.
Listen, Scott, if we're going to talk about fighting the last war and the war before that, our next potential candidate is for you, as Rob Shaw is reporting that one John Rustad, former and forever leader of the Conservative Party of BC, is sniffing around to see if he can find 250 members willing to sign his nomination papers.
Yeah, he's reportedly has asked for a nomination packet, which I will grant him this. Won't have the name recognition problem that some of the other contestants might. Might not be an entirely great thing considering how his leadership ended up, but it would just be so hilarious if he ends up back in the leadership role. And there's a not insignificant chance that crowded field, ranked ballot, weird things can happen on. It would just be funny more than anything else to go through all of this, spend between all the campaigns, probably a couple $1 million just to end up right back where we were.
It would be incredibly funny. I'm very here for it. I'm suddenly very pro John Rustad winning this leadership race purely for the content. As I saw it posted somewhere on one of the channels I'm in, we're very here for the messy bitch era of John Rustad. Just, what are you doing, man? Retire. Enjoy retirement. This can't be pleasurable or enjoyable or worthwhile for you, but I'm here for it. For his own part, he posted to Twitter, no comment, just out of context.
I think we all got the context on that one. But yeah, I don't even know what to say at this point. It's just funny that this is even an option, but why the hell not?
So things will, settle out a little bit as people have to actually put up the money, put up the signatures. The Conservative base, we don't actually know how big it is right now because the party did not return their fourth quarter financials in time this past week. For once, it was the Green Party who was more on their paperwork than the Conservatives.
Yeah, I'm guessing all that messy drama did not help them do all their paperwork back in the fall here. So they got hit with $100 late filing fine. And some point we will find out what they did in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they have until March 2nd now to file the contribution data. And I don't think we need to go into the numbers, but we'll come back to how the parties were doing once we have their annual reports in a month or two. That'll be more interesting, I think, because then we'll see their balance sheets as well, and we'll know who actually has any money in the bank. And my suspicion is only one party does. Maybe the Greens have a little bit too. Well, speaking of the Conservative leadership race, there are other candidates in it, and one of those candidates, former MLA Ian Black, has an idea, and it's an old idea again. What's old is new tonight. Ian Black wants to cancel the George Massey Tunnel replacement project and revive Christy Clark's 10-lane bridge that she went out in 2017 on.
I just can't wait till we get to the the new NDP government of like 2037, replacing the then tired Conservative government, who will then recancel this bridge and bring back the tunnel project. This is just going to be one of those things that's just going to get batted back and forth, isn't it?
It's incredibly fighting the last battle, or like 2 battles ago. It's wild. It makes no sense. Like, maybe there's a better argument for the bridge versus a tunnel, and like, technically they haven't broken ground on the new tunnel yet. We were just trying to figure that out before recording, and it looks like the plan is to put shovels in the ground this year, but they're still finishing some geotechnical, which I imagine they could do. Some of the geotechnical would cross over, whether it's a bridge or a tunnel. But they don't have, like, they have the idea of a plan for a bridge, but I doubt they have the full, like, project on a shelf in a binder from 7 years ago or whatever. 9 years ago, Jesus.
Yeah, well, that's part. Yeah, the 9 years ago thing is a bit of the not as dismissive of you on this, because this has been a long time coming to get to this point. The NDP, when they got in 2017, immediately put a pause on the bridge and then spent a long time studying the option of a tunnel, and before finally giving that the go ahead. So it has stretched out quite a bit, and I still hear and see complaints from people in Delta about what a nightmare it is to get from there into the city, and the traffic congestion around there is still a complaint on it. And in that respect, there's at least a constituency for not being happy with how the NDP has handled this thing, and room to differentiate oneself on it. If you don't, squint too closely at the timelines, but there's not exactly been a sense of urgency on the NDP's part, considering they've been able to move the Patello Bridge replacement through a lot quicker.
It's just painful, because I try to think about, when will the next election be? Like, maybe it'll be this year, but realistically it's probably 1 or 2, maybe 3 years away, in which case, if Fionn Black somehow wins the leadership, and it's so weird to go out on this idea first. I get
on the other hand,
appeals to some people in Delta, but
well, I also will give, this is, I think, the first policy proposal that anyone's put forward that isn't just, the same 12 bullet points that everyone has on their website, and definitely the first one we're talking about. So, maybe there's some political strategy here of at least coming out swinging with an idea, even if, we could both have some criticisms of it.
Scott, we love talking shit ideas on this podcast. Don't give them too much credit. If someone sends us a press release that's just crazy, we're probably going to put it in the show notes.
Oh yeah, crazier the better when it comes to picking random stuff on here. But
I'm talking to you, Center BC.
Oh, I'm also thinking that, remember early on in the podcast when the Conservatives were just this fringe group of 12 people that were keeping the fire going there, but weren't doing much else. They had we spent a solid 25 minutes on this wild monorail system that was a surprisingly large part of the Conservative website that was clearly just one person in that dozen or so who were still active on there's pet idea on how to transform BC's transportation system.
Yeah, it was going to be a ferry to the island from the edge of YVR with a monorail to it.
That one still gets kicked. Well, not the monorail part, but that idea still gets kicked around every now and then.
And so, yeah. Where I am looking for big ideas from is the Green Party, but they are going to be in the midst of a search for a new deputy leader, as Dr. Lisa Gunderson has announced her resignation as deputy leader, to which many, even Green supporters I saw, went, "Oh, she still had that job?"
Yeah, I didn't realize she was still doing that.
Gunderson was the candidate in Oak Bay Gordon Head in 2024 and has been deputy leader, I think, since 2022.
Shortly after Sonia First became leader, I think was roughly when the timelines were on that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of notable as the first prominent resignation under Emily Lowen's leadership of the Greens. I can't read any animosity in how the statement is written, so at least it's not a Gunderson clearly is mad, but
Oh, we talked,
and it's also been a number of years, so
yeah, it's been a number of years. It's not like the deputy leader of the Green Party lets one do a lot to substantively advance issues one cares about. Like, I kind of get that. On the other hand, we did talk early on in the Emily Lowen tenure as leader, or in the lead up to that. But this is going to be a challenging integration, because Lowen's coming at it from a much more just like populist left approach, and that's not necessarily where the Green Party has been historically. So there are no doubt going to be tensions between the old guard and the new upstarts.
absolutely. And like, even if it's not tensions, parties need renewal, especially ones that have been struggling to assert their relevancy for a while. So it's an opportunity for the Greens to put forward some new faces and energy, and I'll be kind of curious, if I catch it, who steps up and where they position themselves into the next election. Speaking of next elections, the Federal Conservative Party will be continuing with Pierre Poilievre for the next election, as the Conservative Convention went off without a hitch. On the leadership review, he received a whopping 87.4% support. It wasn't like absolute, like,
It wasn't North Korean election level, but like
12
it was
12.5% were against him. But it's
honestly,
I think
any group of conservatives, you will find 12.5% that will stake out the opposite position from the crowd.
I like that the NDP is like that as well. It's really just the Liberals you would expect a unanimous. But even there's different camps within them.
There will be fights over that, mostly over like less matters of principle and more matters of who's electable and whose faction is rising or falling in the party at that moment.
Yeah, and I think the challenge in the Conservative Party, or the strength, well, the thing that happened in the Conservative Party is there's one faction, and it is the Pierre Poilievre faction. And it was dominant, especially at the convention, right? Because, as we talked about, this was a convention held in Calgary, Alberta, at the same time as the Conservative Ontario convention was, so fewer of them were there. Probably weren't a lot from Quebec either. So it was a friendly audience.
Yeah, I will disagree a bit about there being one faction in the Conservative Party. There is a lot of different factions. The Canadian conservatism's a pretty broad tent with like a lot of traditions, approaches, issue sets people care about, kind of merged together in a somewhat awkward coalition that has, historically been a challenge to keep together. And this is less there is now one coalition than a case of the coalitions are not fighting at the moment, or kind of sticking with the existing arrangement. But yeah, the minute he resigns or gets kicked out of the job, at some point you will see those quite separate worldviews collide in a more public manner.
Yeah, I think we see a little bit of hints of that in how the votes broke down on some of the more on some of the issues voted on and some of the policies. So, for example, on a resolution to enact tighter immigration rules and comprehensive screening of newcomers, 97% vote for it. So if there's one thing that unites current conservatives, it's tighter immigration system. But one thing on the other side that they split almost right down the middle is whether Canada should reverse its conversion therapy ban that Aaron O'Toole got his Conservative Party at the time to allow unanimous consent for it to pass through, much to the later chagrin of big chunks of the party. So the resolution to oppose the conversion therapy ban was actually passed by 52% of delegates, but because it didn't get the majority in more than half the provinces and 3 territories, it didn't pass the convention. So a majority voted for it, but didn't get the double majority situation because majorities in Manitoba, Quebec, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Labrador, PEI, and the territories did not support repealing the ban, if that makes sense, right? So
it's a little convoluted, but basically their policy book, if I'm reading this right, is not changing, but there's disagreement within the party where it's almost right down the middle.
Yeah, which is fascinating to me, to see something go exactly like that. On stand your ground type laws, or at least the right to defend your property, 91% supported it. So there's things they all agree on, but the social issue policy kind of split the party.
Yeah, social issues are pardon?
Split them on the vote, didn't fracture it in half.
Yeah, I mean the party's not jump right apart over that by any means. Yeah, stuff like crime, you usually get a pretty strong consensus among all the factions. There are some libertarian types in the Conservative Party, but actually, even particularly on stand your ground stuff, you're going to get them going with everyone else on it. What was it, 9% that... Sorry. Yeah, the 3% that went against tighter screening of immigrants, probably that libertarian faction on there. I'm actually a little surprised the policy proposal to pursue immediate deportation of non-citizens convicted of a serious offense was only at 77%, and that's probably says more about what's been in the news lately than anything else.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting backdrop to this, is kind of the two parts to it, right? Number one is Pierre Poilievre's popularity nationally is not in any way reflected by what happened in Calgary. Conservatives generally like him, like people who say they will vote Conservative. But outside of that group, his unfavorabilities are climbing again, even as Mark Carney's popularity continues to hold. And then the other half of the coin is connections between, what's happening in the USA and whether or not that is influencing conservatism in Canada. And some conservatives want it to, and some don't. And most Canadians don't. And so if they go with the, we're going to be Trumpy, they're shooting themselves in the foot of any future electoral victory. Yeah,
and that's kind of where I'm curious where that 23% that voted against that immigration policy, if we're coming from on that. Because, deportations of people convicted of serious criminality, that's a pretty common sense, reasonable policy. It's in theory what the Canadian immigration system's already set up to do. Doesn't always do it particularly well or with decent speed, but it's something that you would generally expect a very broad consensus on. So it's interesting if that's getting somewhat changed by just the broader background of stuff going on here. And yeah, on the polling thing, I saw some interesting polling about the attitude or tone Poilievre takes, where his very combative attitude, people who are going to vote conservative really like it, and if anything, think that the help is more convincing and strengthens their intention to vote conservative. And people who are like on the fence to disinclined to vote absolutely hate it. So it's a real challenge to like change tone in a way that lets him grow the tent on that, and it's going to be interesting to see if he navigates it, because it's certainly not the only approach a conservative could take when addressing the country or campaigning.
Well, I think even in the couple weeks that the House of Commons has returned, we've seen a slightly different Poilievre. He's still combative in question period because that's what question period is for, but on individual bills that the Liberals are coming forward with, like the grocery rebate that we'll come back to in a second, they're, open to working with the government to help Canadians, right? It's not we are going to shut every committee down. We are going to use every procedural tool to jam up Parliament. It's let's broadly make things work, do what the opposition is supposed to do most of the time, which is, not let things sail through, but offer constructive critiques. And I think that's also partially a reality of them just looking at the polls and going, it would be bad if we went to the election. Maybe they'd win, but there's no good headwinds for them right now or tailwinds for them right now that they had 18 months ago. And so waiting it out is probably a smarter play than trying to get to that election he wanted so bad a year ago.
Yeah, and I think you see that dynamic of the new approach in Parliament really on the bail reform bill that is just going off to the Senate now, where, the Conservatives and the Liberals ended up striking a deal on it. Conservatives got some amendments in, but, they basically found a way to, rather than just going straight opposed, took the partial win. And there's still plenty of criticisms the Conservatives will direct towards that of bill of not going far enough, having too many holes, leaving some issues unaddressed, etc. But they were willing to take the partial win on policy and get something in place that they could then go back to, rather than just going straight up opposition.
They've learned a whole bunch from Jagmeet Singh. We've gone from the Trudeau-Singh alliance to the Carney-Poilievre one.
Well, an alliance is a stretch on that. But
well, and the other wasn't officially an alliance, right? It was a broader agreement.
It was much more of an alliance between Singh and Trudeau than this, case-by-case move is.
But it's interesting as well, because this past week we had a lot of reflective pieces written because Ottawa decided to throw a big party to unveil Stephen Harper's prime ministerial portrait and did it's been 20 years since he was elected, and they're just a bunch of fawning pieces. And I just kept thinking, we already have a national portrait of when the nude Harper was painted.
I don't even
remember that painting?
That one.
Oh, it's I won't subject anyone to it. This was a painting by Margaret Sutherland, actually sold to a Vancouver man about a decade ago, of an unflattering Stephen Harper painted. I think it was painted back in 2010 or 2012. Huh. Yeah. I'll include a link in the show notes. It's a CBC, so you won't have to see anything too scandalous, but that's the picture I'll always think of when I think of Stephen Harper portraits. The actual portrait unveiled itself is fine. It's a prime ministerial portrait. It's got stuff he wanted in it. Good for him.
Yeah, apparently the artist is famous for putting a bunch of Easter eggs in the official portraits he does, so I'm sure the political history nerds will have fun with that one. but we're not going to dive into it on this podcast. But I think more interesting is some of the speeches we've heard from Harper and just the general tone that he's taken in the particularly the last year, but we've gotten a new round of it with the portrait unveiling, and that it's kind of brought him back into the limelight a little bit, and it's just real interesting to see the tone that he's striking of, Canadians must be willing to make sacrifices to keep the country independent. I think back last spring he said something like there would be no price he wouldn't be willing to pay to keep Canada sovereign, and that's just a real striking difference compared to Poilievre, who in his convention speech not only didn't mention Trump by name, but didn't even obliquely reference the U.S. and the changing relationship it has with Canada.
Yeah, I mean, not to disagree, just to point out, in his feted Davos speech, Mark Carney didn't mention Trump by name, but he very clearly was talking about the U.S. and Trump. Poilievre neither mentioned nor hinted at the U.S. Harper, though, is really interesting, right? Post ministerialship, he's been heavily involved in the world stage through some of the international conservative alliances, the International Democratic Union, I think it's called, where, he meets dignitaries of different countries and people involved in different conservative movements. And some of that ties to Orban and some of the stuff that's a little bit more on the populist, authoritarian end. And so I was always curious where he'd go on this, but Canada came first for him. And so full points on that when he comes back home, because he didn't have to take this, right? A lot of prime ministers post just kind of go into hiding. What's Justin Trudeau doing these years? Hanging out with Katy Perry, sometimes at Davos.
Yeah, and I think it's generally good Canadian prime ministers, after they leave office, take a step back, and really it would be nice if Trudeau did a little more of that. Not that he's really been weighing into politics, but just it's a nice break to not have to think about the last guy for a while.
It's also nice when your party's still in power.
Yeah.
To just let them have their space too.
There's that. But that's it. Every now and then there'll be someone will say something or weigh in, and it's usually pretty rare. But I think these circumstances, particularly when there is just a background event where their prime minister is going to be offering a bunch of remarks and reflections, that's probably about the right level of engagement on it. And particularly with the uncertain times we're in, it's doesn't go amiss. As long as it's intermittent and limited and situationally appropriate.
Yeah, this was actually the first time I'd seen Jean Chrétien out in a while, because he had a sit down conversation roast with, well, it was probably billed as a conversation, but he's Jean Chrétien, so he can't go without taking jabs and making jokes. He sat across from Harper, and there's some videos I saw from that which remind you why that man had political talent and could win massive elections back to back, because he is genuinely funny. So that was interesting to see Chrétien out. I didn't look deeply into what geopolitical commentary he had. Nevertheless, yeah, Harper has such a powerful position in the history of the current Conservative Party, both being the one who is prime minister, but also just helping build it and create it out of the ashes of the Progressive Conservatives and Reform Alliance over time. So
yeah, he very much the elder statesman of the party. which does give him not just elder statesman and founder of the party, which does give him a fair bit of gravitas. I'm not sure how much influence that leads to. There'll be like a lot in the, political operative, staffer class, party executive. Like there's a lot of soft power and influence that can probably be directed there. In terms of the base and particularly how that's evolved, I'm not sure how much is still there. Like, if the referendum in Alberta ends up happening, like, probably Harper's one of the better people to be going out there making the Team Canada pitch. I'm not sure if it's going to be as effective as it might have been like 10 years ago if he was making that same pitch.
I mean, Jason Kenney was a pretty loyal and close Harper guy, and look how Albertans turned on him.
Actually,
Albertan conservatives, I mean.
Yeah, speaking of Jason Kenney, he's also been kind of going out there swinging when it comes to Canadian sovereignty issues and like that, which, once again, just puts a huge contrast point compared to Poilievre. But there's been a break. Like Harper wasn't unfamiliar, didn't avoid touching on populist topics or swoon in those waters sometimes, but it feels night and day compared to where things are now and the kind of populism that marked conservatism in the early 2010s and the aughts.
Well, despite that changing rhetoric over time, it still seems to work for the Conservatives, as we have the fourth quarter financials from the federal parties as well. In this case, the Conservatives did put their paperwork in on time because the federal Conservatives are a functional political party that's not in a civil war or didn't end the year in civil war, where, there was a solid week where you didn't know who the leader was.
And, has a solid track record of fundraising that, allows them to ensure they can keep their staff paid happy and have a bunch of lawyers and accountants on retainer to handle this stuff expeditiously.
Yeah, basic functionings of a political party. So they raised $6.4 million in Q4 from 42,000. Now that was their lowest final quarter since 2021, which was also a Q4 in an election year. So election years can move donations around a little more. So it's not necessarily like they weren't popular, because they did raise $48.1 million last year, which is a record for the party, beating the previous record of $41.7 million, which is wild amounts of money. I think that well exceeds the spending limit in an election, which just means I guess they can spend a lot between elections. For comparison, the Liberals actually did really well. They raised $5.995 million in the fourth quarter from 41,000 contributors. So almost as many supporters. Their best Q4 since 2020. They raised $29.7 million through the year, though. So they ended strong. The rest of the year was a little bit weaker. And the NDP raised $6.3 million over the year, which is kind of where they are for most years, according to Eric Grenier's writ blog.
Not great, but considering they basically imploded and were risked of becoming a complete non-entity, not terrible.
Could be worse.
could be worse. The NDP story.
With that, we do get a little peek into the NDP leadership race as it stood at December 31st, at least from the fundraising point of view. And in that sense, Avi Lewis's campaign is running away with it with as much money as everyone else combined. He has raised, as of December 31st, $7.8 million. Since then, he's reported they've exceeded $1 million in fundraising, which is about how much Jagmeet Singh actually raised in his leadership bid. The runner-up right now is Heather McPherson, who's raised $415,000 as of December 31st. Rob Ashton, $231,000. Tennille Johnston, 142,000, and Tony McQuail, 95,000. Now, Tennille and Tony have both, I believe, passed the 100,000 they need to stay in the race and be on the final ballot, but are clearly well behind everyone else. I think.
Well, they need more than just that 100,000.
I think they have exceeded. I think they've gotten enough to also pay out the party's quarter. Because
you'll need like you'll incur a bunch of expenses doing this too. So you really just can't only hit that number. You gotta exceed that. So yeah, we'll likely not see a huge bunch of drop-offs or anything. I think Quayle's the only one that was looking like it was going to be close on that, because these on the elections the fundraising data that's shown right now, he's just a little shy of it, but reportedly since that filing, it exceeded the 100K mark on there. So yeah, it looks like Lewis is probably the front runner on this, and historically there's been a pretty decent correlation between fundraising and vote totals. So bodes well for him.
Yeah, the other thing Eric has in his blog that's behind the paywall is a regional breakdown, and I've seen that where Avi Lewis is dominating across the entire country with the exception of the province of Alberta, where Heather McPherson is in the lead, which suggests, unsurprising that she's able to rack up the donations in her home province, but bodes extra worse for her that she can't, build that reach beyond Alberta. Like, the argument she's trying to make for leaders is she's got the experience winning as an MP and can build a campaign, but if she can't build a national campaign, it's a slight downside for her, versus Lewis's campaign is doing something impressive here for, coming from not having a seat to pulling in $1 million from coast to coast to coast.
Yeah, he's a good fundraiser. It's going to be interesting to see if he does become leader, whether that translates to the party. And yeah, it's potentially you'll have an NDP that has better fundraising operations than it's had for a little while. Might be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, because I'm not sure Lewis is going to be the type of leader that really is going to be able to expand the NDP's appeal outside of the core group that stuck with it. But more money never hurts.
Yeah, the raw number of donations for each of the candidates as of December 31st is like under 10,000 in total, which is not too inspiring. That doesn't, I don't know, hopefully it improves and there's a good turnout for the final vote to see how big the party has grown beyond just how many people have contributed to the different campaigns. But yeah, it does look like, barring some weird upset, he will win, and it's a question of first or second ballot at this point. Turning back to the federal government, we talked about the grocery rebate Carney announced last week. That actually moved through Parliament pretty quick with the support of the other parties. But the parliamentary budget officer did take a good look at this and went, how much will it cost to give everyone a bunch of, well, not everyone, how much will it cost to provide a bunch of GST rebates and increased rebates to the lowest income? And the answer is $12.4 billion over 4 years.
So a little higher than
over 5 years, but yeah.
Yeah, if I remember when we were talking about this last week, the number was sitting at 9-ish billion, I think. So it's a fairly big miss on percentage terms.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing the initial pricing for it, or maybe I just skimmed by it.
I think it was buried in the backgrounder, if I remember.
Probably. Yeah, it costs money to cut checks to people. And now it's kind of a question of, is $3 $3 billion this year and $1.7 to $1.9 billion annually after that the best way to help people deal with inflation? It does go to people who need it the most. So it's not the worst, like most indefensible policy. It also just, I don't know.
It's not gonna. Yeah, but you're not really doing anything to address the underlying issues on this.
Yeah, that's what we kind of talked about last week, right? It's not inspiring. It's repetitive.
Well, yeah, not only that, like if like on the margin, it's going to be like slightly inflationary, and you know, either of the two theories out there on why grocery prices have climbed up, whether it's a issue of broader inflation, complicated supply chains, shortages, etc., or concentration in the grocery sector. Either one of those, you throw money at the consumers on this one, and like a fair bit of that is just going to end up being captured by the food sector on that. Like, you really do need to tackle the underlying issues on this and the things that are actually making food expensive.
There was a little bit in their announcement last week that we talked about with that, but again, it seemed insufficient. So maybe we'll see more coming, but it's nice to at least have an idea of what this just cost us all. Speaking of tackling underlying issues, we see a little bit more of the government's plan for housing, as they have tabled a bill just today to empower Build Canada Homes to become a standalone Crown corporation. It's going to absorb the Canada Lands Company, and it will have among its powers the ability to acquire land, just like TransLink here in BC. Or I think the CMHC and at least the Canada Lands Corp, the existing Crown corporation tasked with developing real estate and managing the CN Tower.
Yeah, that's going to get folded into Build Canada Homes, so
we can build homes on the top of the CN Tower.
Bureaucracies have this weird way of growing where like random things get attached to other stuff that doesn't always make the most sense. That'll just be yet another example of it. It's good they're finally doing it. Disappointing that there isn't like a particularly clear target set in this, and it's good that they're able to go out and acquire land. It's kind of a necessary part to building housing on it, and it's overall good. They're just moving ahead with this.
There was some weird criticism from Jenny Kwan of the NDP in there saying this. She kind of had a half a point that, it reduces accountability because now it's no longer going to be the Minister of Housing that's responsible for building housing. It's a standalone Crown corporation. It's kind of like there's no Minister of Mail, which actually used to be a thing. It was titled something different, but it's a Crown corporate. We just blame Canada Post for sucking. Why is there no housing being built? Well, Build Canada Homes can't do it. Well, who's the political? And it's like, okay. But her broader argument was Parliament should have a direct role in overseeing all of this. And the way she described it was bad. It's kind of the opposite. Swing and a miss on the attack there.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where it really should be just get out and do as much as you can on it, and a bunch of money goes into this Crown corporation and nothing's to show for it. Then you can hold parliamentary committee meetings to dig into it, but I don't have like a huge amount of trust that a gaggle of parliamentarians, or particularly Gregor Robertson's going to be more effective than a dedicated agency on this.
Like, it used to be the case that CMHC built the housing, and that's a standalone Crown corporation. So whatever, it's fine. Give it the powers, build homes. If it's in the title, maybe they'll do it. The other interesting shockwave in Ottawa this week was the announcement of who will be running for the Liberals in, was it the who will be running for the Liberals in the Scarborough Southwest by-election to replace, I believe it's Bill Blair. And the answer is Dolly Begum.
Yeah, so Bill Blair is failing upward again to be an ambassador to England this time. So yeah, that opens up a seat there. And unlike Chrysler Freeland's departure, this seems to be happening in the right order fairly quickly. So, that's all proper this time. They seem to have learned their lesson there. And yeah, that's kind of set off a series of dominoes with the Liberals scooping up the provincial NDP's deputy leader, Dolly Begum, which also has, as part of this chain reaction, had Nate Erskine Smith look at finally making the jump he'd hinted at for a while into provincial politics, or should I say a jump again, because he had an unsuccessful run in the last leadership race for the Ontario Liberal Party.
But this time he's going to go for her seat and run for leader, versus last time he just kept his seat in Ottawa. But yeah, it's a real musical chairs situation happening here. And I don't know which is the most interesting. The complete failure, I don't know what it is with the Ontario NDP. The NDP and Liberals are sometimes close, but it feels like going from the Ontario NDP, where there is still a decently strong Liberal Party, or decently popular Liberal Party, to the Mark Carney Liberals. Is a different flavor of jump than one would expect, especially to go from deputy leader of one.
Yeah, although,
a real hit for Merit Styles.
Yeah, it's a bad reflection on the Ontario NDP, also the federal NDP, that they couldn't get a prominent MPP to run for them. It's like none of the NDPs look good out of it. I mean, win for Carney, because someone with a fairly high profile, and you get the benefit of a defection on that to shore things up and make the impact just a little bit more potent on it. But yeah, the Ontario NDP is an interesting, it seems to always fall short of its potential.
In the last two elections, I think they were outvoted by the Liberals, but First Past the Post gave the NDP official opposition status, and the current polling projections would suggest the same would happen again, even with worse NDP results and better Liberal results.
Yeah, and that election, though, they fought a very defensive campaign that was basically only about keeping the seats they had on it, which, met their goal.
Great thing to do when you're in opposition.
Yeah, it met their goal, but it hardly took the fight to Doug Ford on it. And yeah, the Liberals fared worse, but that was largely because of bad vote splits on it. There were popular vote totals weren't so far off, and the Ontario NDP has been a perpetual, if we can just get a little momentum, we can vault into the default for opposition to the PCs, and then that will be a launching pad into provincial government. And other than Bob Rae, that has never worked for them.
Yeah, and the Ontario Liberals have a bizarrely high floor to their vote. They can lose all their seats and still 25% of Ontarians or more are yeah, I'm voting Liberal. Meanwhile, Doug Ford is I'm going to run for a fourth term and be one of the 4 longest serving premiers ever. Probably won't make it to number 1, who I think served 24 years. I
don't know if the Ontario opposition parties continue to be such a mess. And we've been trash talking the Ontario NDP. That the Liberals have not had a good run since Wynne defeated Tim Hudak back in 2014. They've just like gone from one political disaster to another. They I don't even know if their like last two leaders have done a horrible job on their campaign. Like, Doug Ford might be the luckiest man in Canada based off just the quality of the opposition he's had to face through the whole thing.
Well, whether Nate Erskine Smith wins the Liberal leadership race in Ontario or Eric Lombardi, who has thrown his name in or is considering throwing his name in, I should say.
I think it's
okay.
With the amount of you don't put up a website saying I am solidly considering like write up a few pieces about it if you're not actually like really going to throw your hat in the ring. I think this is more of a soft launch strategy than anything, but yeah, I'm quite interested to see how this goes. Not a huge amount of name recognition, but for people like very involved in housing issues, it'll probably be a familiar name. Founded More Neighbors Toronto, which is the like main Toronto YIMBY organization, and I think has a fairly successful advocacy track record on that. So interesting to see him throw his hat in the race. I think it was a little unexpected, but kind of like the energetic, youthful candidate with a housing focus could be quite the shakeup for the Ontario Liberals that have been a little moribund and like stuck in like older establishment leaders for a while now.
Well, maybe what they need is some AI energy to push them ahead, as the Federal Industry Ministry has released its What We Heard results and findings from the AI consultation they launched in the fall. This consultation was designed to figure out, what should be our direction on this growing industry and how do we approach it. They received 64,600 responses to 26 questions. They commissioned 28 experts to write 32 different papers and reports. And then they went, oh shit, we fired everyone. Who's going to read all this shit? And they said, you know what? We have so much AI to throw at it. They threw Cohere Command A, OpenAI GPT-5 Nano, Anthropic Claude HiQ, and Google Gemini Flash at all of these submissions and generated the AI consultation report in AI.
A little recursive there.
There's no guarantee. I'm not guaranteeing that the experts also didn't write their reports with AI. I skimmed one or two. Not enough to know.
We see that. What is it, like Deloitte, McKinsey? One of those ones, or maybe both. There's been a couple scandals, like Newfoundland. I want to say Australia, where consultant reports have turned out to be done in AI with some imagined references popping up in them.
Well, what's fascinating here is Michael Geist keeps a close eye on this, the technology critic and writer and law professor. And because the government released these 32 consultation papers on its open government portal, he went, hey, they used AI, I can use AI. And he threw them at ChatGPT and Perplexity AI and got summaries and themes of agreement and disagreement and shared links to those and compared them to the government's actual finding report or official report. And in his view, quote, the government consistently softened into government speak with balancing discussions that create an illusion of consensus that isn't really there.
So to me, that sounds like pretty much every What We Heard report that any government has ever put out. Honestly, the more interesting thing in this is just the process of actually being able to fairly efficiently do a compare and contrast with the actual original submissions on that. Because I don't know about you, but whenever I'm reading one of those, this is what we heard. It always sounds like they have taken the edge off of a lot of it and are, more predisposed to talk up the parts that they're wanting to talk up. I rarely ever see one of those where it like really goes hard against what the government was wanting out of it.
I have seen ones, especially from parliamentary committees, that are kind of like multi-party written, and everyone comes to consensus. That's just like sections off the kinds of feedback they got, and they say, this group said this group said this group said this. We recommend none of that. We're doing this, right? And it kind of but like it's just random quotes from a random selection.
Yeah,
does happen.
Yeah, when you have a bunch of parties that are going to be coming out of different degree on it, yeah, that will be a little more of a cross-section on it. It's more the when the civil service and political parts get work on it, that it tends to, I find, be a little more of a little more supportive of the underlying mission than it would otherwise be.
The other thing that was funny in Geist's analysis is I think he points out at times that the government seems less boosterish of AI than the experts were. Like he said, the experts were like, we're going to fall behind. And the same is true for speed. The experts' reports frame as a strategic variable in which countries that move faster lead. But the government has no acknowledgement that a slow pace may already be undermining our competitiveness. So I don't know. It's more of a fascinating case study than anything I have like really strong like policy feelings about, other than just like general underlying skepticism of the whole industry. But it's a fascinating process that got implemented in the most ironic situation. And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.